Assalamu alaikum. We have just launched our Fight with Light fundraising campaign for Seekers Hub Global, where our goal is to raise $60,000 in monthly donations by the end of the year, and all of this money will go towards fighting ignorance and fighting hatred and fighting extremism by spreading the light of knowledge and the light of guidance and the light of the way of our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We hope that you'll join us in this fight, and you can do so by becoming a monthly donor at seekershub.org/donate.
You're listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani, who will be covering Imam Yusuf al-Nabahani's beautiful collection of 40 sets of 40 Hadiths of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, as well as Imam Zarnuji's guidance for seekers of knowledge regarding the ways of seeking knowledge, Ta'lim al-Muta, Turuq al-Allum.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد ذي القدر العظيم وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان وهدى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, we're continuing to look at guidance for seekers of knowledge from Ta'lim al-Muta'allim of Imam Zarnuji rahimahullah ta'ala. And this chapter is on how one arranges, is practical counsel on how one arranges one's studies. So he tells us rahimahullah ta'ala, وينبغي لطالب العلم أن يكرر سبق الأمس 5 مرات. It is proper for a student of knowledge to review the previous lesson, literally yesterday's lesson, the previous lesson, 5 times. وَسَبْقَ الْيَوْمِ الَّذِي قَبْلَ الْأَمْسِ 4 مرات. And the lesson before that 4 times. وَالسَّبْقَ الَّذِي قَبْلَهُ 3 مرات. And the lesson before that 3 times. وَالَّذِي قَبْلَهُ مرتين, right? And the one before that twice. والذي قبله مرة واحدة. And the one before that once. فهذا أدعى إلى الحفظ, because this is closer to memorizing, to retaining. Right? And he mentioned it's not merely about memory, about memorization, understanding, depth of understanding, getting the subtleties and nuances, right? But it is only possible through review, right? It is only possible through review. وينبغي ألا يعتاد المخافتة في التكرار. And it's proper that one not become accustomed to simply silently reviewing. لأن الدرس والتكرار ينبغي أن يكونا بقوة ونشاط. Because one's study and one's review of one's studies, it's proper that they be with strength and vigor. So one should do so with a raised voice. Okay? With a raised voice. Because one of the reasons is that what he mentions here, that it gives you strength and vigor. And the second is, the more senses you engage in your studies, the more you will retain what you study. Okay? So by raising your voice, you are not simply using the sense of sight, but you're also hearing as well. So all of this is more conducive to retaining it. But at the same time, وَلَا يَجْهَرُ جَهْرًا يُجْهِدُ نَفْسَهُ. But however, one does not raise one's voice in a manner that would tire one out. كَيْ لَا يَنْقَطِعَ عَنِ التِّكْرَارِ. Lest one be cut, one cease review. فَخَيْرُ الْأُمُورِ أَوْسَطُهَا. Because the best of matters are the most balanced. So this is one of the practical things, that to have extensive review, and he suggests one thing, that whatever lesson that you've taken, before the next lesson you review it 5 times. And the lesson before that you review it 4 times. And the lesson before that 3 times. So you have constant review. Right? Constant review. The sign of sufficient review is that at any time, if we said, okay, now, Monday's class, what did we cover? Can you explain the whole thing without having to prepare? Right? Last week's class, what was it? What did you cover? What was it about? What are the definitions? What are the key issues? What are the exceptions to that? Right? And that's the sign that the ulama mention of being properly prepared for a class, that you could explain it before the class. But because you're attending the class is because you have some gaps, some things that you're not clear about, some things that you're confused about, some things you have questions about. Right? But besides those points, you could present it at least acceptably, better than that, proficiently, better than that, you could present it as well as the teacher, and the ideal is that you could present it better than the teacher, because the teacher already knows the subject, so in theory, they don't have to prepare for it. But you prepared for it. You looked things up. You researched the issues. You put in blood, sweat, and tears. Right? And there are people who prepared like that. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. The least ideal is that when one finishes a text, one could teach it. If one doesn't, then one wasted a lot of one's time. Right? If you complete something, you should be able to teach it. Now, it doesn't mean that you can teach it. You want to always seek permission before anything like that. But one could teach it without having to take recourse to one's notes. That if just the text only was opened without any accompanying notes, one could teach it because one's retained it. And even without the text, one could explain the concepts, the issues, the definitions, even without the text. Right? And if one can't, then the only thing between you and mastery is effort and review. Right? As Ibn al-Jazari says in his Muqaddimah and Tajweed, the only thing between a person upholding and leaving the rules of Tajweed is practice, bifakkihi, with one's mouth, because the Tajweed relates to pronunciation. Right? The only thing between you and mastery is practice. Right? And the ulama have, and this is something that people have been talking about for a long time. If you want sort of the modern scientific way of looking at it, if you look at Anders Ericsson's work on peak, where he talks about how mastery is attained, that's where Malcolm Gladwell took the 10,000 hour rule, quote unquote. But it's not so much about the 10,000 hours, but it's about mentored, purposeful practice. It is mentored, so it's guided practice. You don't just do whatever you feel like, but it's mentored, it's guided, but there's consistent practice. That's the only way of mastering something. One of the scholars said, the only thing between you and mastering a subject, after with studying it, it's you and your desk. Right? In terms of the world of means, ultimately it's all from Allah. But that's a spiritual reality, but Allah gives through the means. وحكي أن أبا يوسف رحمه الله تعالى كان يذاكر الفقه مع الفقهاء بقوة ونشاط. So it's related that Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah, used to review fiqh with the fuqaha, with the scholars of fiqh, with strength and vigor. وَكَانَ صِهْرُهُ عِنْدَهُ. And his, who's the sihr? The brother-in-law. The brother-in-law was with him. وَكَانَ صِهْرُهُ عِنْدَهُ يَتَعَجَّبْ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ. And his brother-in-law would be amazed. ويقول أنا أعلم أنه جائع منذ 5 أيام. I know that he's been hungry for 5 days. ومع ذلك يناظر بقوة ونشاط. And despite that, he would discuss with strength and vigor. Because they really wanted it. They really cared about it. وينبغي ألا يكون لطالب العلم فترة فإنها آفة. And it befits a seeker of knowledge not to have breaks. Right? Because this is grave harm. And breaks here does not mean that you have a day where you go for a picnic, where you rest, but that you don't take time off your studies. Because that time off, where you disconnect, you lose your routines. Right? There's benefit in taking breaks, right? But they have to be suitable and purposeful breaks. Right? That they're not breaks that break habits. Right? And ideally, the breaks should be things that renew you spiritually, right? that give you rest, give you a break, but that refresh you spiritually, right? So the break taken by a student of knowledge would not be like the break taken by the people of dunya. Right? So take a break, for example, like on a weekend they go camping, for example, or they go hiking or whatever, but they use that time to enter into reflection and remembrance. Maybe to go with good company, or to use it as an opportunity to connect with family with a good way. One takes one's cousins and others. One has da'awi aims in it, or one goes to Thousand Islands, but one stops on the way in Kingston, Ontario, where there's this elderly, righteous scholar. So one goes and drops in and, seeks their counsel, for example. So one structures it in a manner that brings meaning to it. Right? Similarly, if one travels, etc., that one considers the spiritual renewal in it, and also the knowledge benefit. But one has to be very careful not to break one's routines. Routines are precious, right? Routines are precious, and which is why historically they say it takes about 2 years to build your core routines. It takes about 2 years to build your core routines. Right? So you want to go full tilt. And full tilt means that you put no less than 50 hours, 60 hours a week of study a week. That's because that's what someone who works a full-time job, that's what they put in. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. And those who believe are more intense in their love of Allah. But it takes time to build that up, and to build up the routines of study, and this is something people, it's a given. But it takes time to build up, but it's easy to break. Right? So one has to be careful of how one structures, week to week, how one structures one's breaks, that they shouldn't be breaks that break one's routines or cause one to lose one's focus, because focus is precious and fleeting. And that should be a criteria for what kind of other activities one does. Does this affect my routines? Does it affect my focus? If it doesn't, of course, there's religious consideration. Is it halal? Is it makruh? Is it a waste of time? But also there's the focus test. Does it affect your focus? وكان أستاذنا شيخ الإسلام برهان الدين رحمه الله تعالى, and his teacher شيخ الإسلام برهان الدين, meaning المرغناني رحمه الله, author of the Hidayah, يقول إنما فقت شركائي بأني لم تقع لي فترة في التحصيل. He said, I only went ahead of my peers. فاق يفوق, I only gained preeminence over my peers, the shuraka, shuraka, partners in seeking knowledge, because I had no fatra, I had no breaks in my seeking knowledge, in the time of attaining knowledge, right? Because we took the 6 conditions for seeking knowledge from the poet. You need focus, time, you focus time over a lengthy period, right? And that only happens through consistent routines that just stay in place. وكان يحكى عن شيخ الإسلام الإسبيجابي, is related from Shaykh al-Islam al-Isbijabi, one of the great Hanafis, أنه وقع له في زمان تحصيله وتعلمه فترة يعني فترة 12 سنة بانقلاب الملك. It's related that al-Isbijabi, during his learning and study, he had a break of 12 years because of an inqilab, because of an overthrow of the government. One ruler took over another, and there's turbulent times. فخرج مع شريكه في المناظرة إلى حيث يمكنهم الاستمرار في طلب العلم. So he left with his partner in munadhara, in discussion here. Doesn't mean debate, in discussion, right? To wherever they were able to continue to seek knowledge. وظلا يدرسانه معا 12 سنة. So they remained just studying it together for 12 years. So al-Isbijabi, he's from Central Asia, and there was political upheaval and unrest. So it wasn't safe to be in the cities, and when there's unrest, the rulers crack down upon the scholars, etc. So he could not remain in the city. So him and his friend, his partner in seeking knowledge, they went around wherever they could go, and they remained there 12 years just reviewing together. Right? But this is also high hope. High hope is not contingent upon creation, in the sense that, we can't find a teacher, means we stop. No, you continue, and you find the opportunity. وظلا يدرسانه معا 12 سنة فصار شريكه شيخ الإسلام للشافعيين. And so his companion became the Shaykh al-Islam, the foremost scholar for the Shafi'is. وكان هو شافعيا, and his companion in studies was Shafi'i. So they weren't even reviewing fiqh together. Or maybe they were. Right? وكان أستاذنا الشيخ القاضي الإمام فخر الإسلام قاضي خان. It says, and our teacher, the Shaykh, the Qadi, the Imam Fakhr al-Islam, the pride of Islam, Qadi Khan, this great Hanafi jurist, who's intimidating. Like he writes with such authority, like wow. That's why you don't have to know his biography to know why they said لا يفتى بخلاف ما قال قاضي خان, or لا يفتى بخلاف فتوى قاضي خان. One does not give fatwa contrary to the fatwa of Qadi Khan, because he had you can tell the strength of his legal state in his writing, that this is the ruling. but not with sternness, but just with authority. كان يقول ينبغي للمتفقه أن يحفظ كتابا واحدا من كتب الفقه دائما ليتيسر له بعد ذلك حفظ ما يسمع من الفقه. He said it befits the seeker of fiqh, the one seeking understanding of the science of fiqh, that they memorize one book of the books of fiqh constantly. Meaning, you have a book that, in Sham, many of the scholars refer to this as your umda. This is your reliance. In every subject, they say, the student of knowledge in every subject should have a umda. Right? That this is a book that they've mastered in that subject. So whatever you ask about in the fiqh of worship, you know, this is your umda. In Aqidah, you have a solid text that you have mastered. In the science of hadith, there's solid text that you've mastered. Right? And then everything else then is built above and around that. Right? لِيَتَيَسَّرْ لَهُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ. So after that, one can retain the rest of fiqh, and the same thing applies to other subjects. Right? That's why they say, مَنْ أَتْقَنَ الْمُتُونَ نَالَ الْفُنُونَ. Whoever masters the core texts, the mutun, attains the sciences. وَمَنْ قَرَأَ الْحَوَاشِي فَمَا حَوَاشِي. And whoever just reads the large books, but without memorizing, without retaining, have attained nothing. Right? Meaning it's, you can say, I read such and such, so it was okay. We'll give the standing ovation later, inshallah. You can just play a recording of go to YouTube and type standing ovation and play it for yourself. But no one really cares what you've read. Right? Al-ilmu ma baqi. Knowledge is what remains. La ma ukhid, not what was taken. Right? So this is his advice about having focus in seeking knowledge, and it's always meant to be difficult. They say anything precious is meant to be challenging. That's the sunnah of Allah in creation. Motherhood's precious, but you don't just like, the stork doesn't come down from the sky and say, "Here's your child." It's difficult, right? Some people say marriage is difficult. Right? A lot of people give up hope. Why? Because anything that is valuable is testing. Even faith itself, right? It's not meant to be easy. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those who believe in the unseen. Right? There's a test. Right? It's testing, and you will be tested in it. Right? Attaining it is testing, and you will be tested in it. Right? And that's just the nature of life. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ. So that He may try you. And the greater what you seek is, the more trying it will be. أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ بَلَاءً الْأَنْبِيَاء ثُمَّ الْأَمْثَلُ فَالْأَمْثَلُ. The people most tested are the prophets, and then the foremost after them, then the foremost after them. That's just the nature of things. Right? They say, قَبُولٌ بِالْامْتِحَانِ مَا يَكُونُ وَمَا قَدْ كَانَ. Right? Divine acceptance without test never was and never will be. That's just the nature. If you don't think you're being tested, this means you're deluded. Because you are being tested, but you just don't know how. Which is a bad situation to be in. The clock's ticking, and you don't know that you're writing an exam. Right? So, but this, so looking at one's time is precious. And I'd advise those who have been following this chapter on arranging one's studies to go back and look at to list what are the main advices that the author has given. And the key is, to look at one's time and how can one build up to maximize the time that one is able to direct towards one's studies. And in everything that one is studying, how do I master what it is that I'm studying. Don't be content with mediocrity. Right? Don't be content with mediocrity. Appreciate what you are studying. And Shaykh Adib, even when he was teaching something that he taught many times, right? He'd have a childlike glee teaching it. And there are these Algerian brothers, and they were rather challenged in their akhlaq and challenging in their conduct. They're studying logic with Shaykh Adib. And Shaykh Adib used to keep this tape recorder so that students wouldn't have to use up their own batteries. So he'd be connected. And one of the most detailed lessons in logic is Mabhathul Ashkal, is the different ways you can structure an argument. And it's one of the challenging things. And Shaykh Adib used to teach it. He had all these different ways. He would point the different ways you can structure an argument. Did the whole thing, but they'd accidentally press play rather than record. And when it finished, they said, Sheikh, we didn't press record. And he's like, he apologized to them. I'm so sorry about that. I wanted to hit them hard. One, because they're taking my class time. I'm sitting waiting for these guys. And he apologized. I'm so sorry. I should have noticed. Wallah, it was right in front of me. Ana muqassir. I'm so sorry. He says, نعيدها. He said, جهز الشريط. So prepare the tape. So they rewound it. He says, تفضل شيخ. Really? Come tomorrow. He spent 25 minutes explaining the whole thing. You want him to repeat it? And he repeated it exactly the same way. Okay? And I was like, I really wanted to hit them hard. But why? Because this is precious. Right? This is precious. Other things that he's been teaching for decades, right? Been teaching at that time for 60 years, and people come and study the same things. Be very excited about it. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahabi who came and said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Ataitu atlubu al-ilm." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Marhaban bi talib al-ilm." Welcome to the seeker of knowledge. Right? It's a great. This is. The whole purpose of creation is facilitated through knowledge. Right? The angels lower their wings to the seeker of knowledge. Why? Because the whole purpose of creation is that Allah be known and that Allah be worshipped. And the key to knowing Allah, the key to worshipping Allah, the key to light in creation is knowledge. Right? Light is knowledge unveiled. That's all that light is, right? So that's why it is critical to look at. One has 168 hours in the week. How can one set up routines that get one to maximize the amount of time one is able to invest in one's studies? And the people of high himmah did nothing less than 10 hours a day. Right? That's what we hear again and again from the people of knowledge, from many different areas. But that is the aspect of effort. There's another aspect that is also required, which is trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Because it is not by your effort that you will attain, but you will not attain without effort. Your effort is required, but it is not what will make you reach. Okay? Effort is adab with Allah. The adab of standing at the door. It is Allah who is al-Fattah. He is the opener of doors. He can open it even if you're a brute, barbarian, banging at the door or snoring at the door. But typically, if you do things in the right way, the right doors open at the right time. So tawakkul is key. And it's actually, trust in Allah is the greatest of means. Trust in Allah and good opinion of Allah is the most powerful of means. Ud'u Allah wa antum muqinuna bil ijaba. Call upon Allah with certitude in His response. And this waw is lil hal. Hala kawnikum muqinina bil ijaba. Call upon Allah, right, with certitude in His response. But you must call. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to facilitate that for us. Inshallah, we're going to have a 1 week break in the Rawhas from here at the hub, because I'm traveling. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you for listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani. Help Seekers Hub give light to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.